Did you know that some people believe that movies, TV shows, books, and other forms of media have predicted the future with such events such as 9/11 and the Trump presidency? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about on this next episode of Peculiar Finds for Curious Minds, and I'm Jennifer Kennedy. Before I start today's episode, I just want to tell you about my website that I have out there, where you can find all of the episodes of Peculiar Finds for Curious Minds, my Facebook page, my Twitter, my YouTube, where you can also find all episodes, information about me, where you can submit a show idea if you'd like to hear me talk about a certain topic for an episode, and you can submit a ghost story. In the future, when I have enough ghost story submissions, I plan to create an episode where I just tell people's real ghost stories. If you'd like your ghost story to be featured on an episode, just submit one on the website. The website is peculiartalk.com. On the website, you can also subscribe to Peculiar Finds for Curious Minds on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Podomatic, so you don't miss an episode. You might not have known that I'm also a psychic medium, and you can find my psychic services that I offer on my website as well. I offer law enforcement help with criminal investigations. I offer psychic readings and help for paranormal teams and paranormal cases. I offer public speaking appearances and other public appearances. I offer tarot readings, and coming soon will be rune readings. And you can also find a few things in a shopping section on there, a few unique things. And I will be adding things soon to the shopping section, including a large protection kit for paranormal situations that includes much more than the average protection kits with simply sage and crystals. So keep an eye out, peculiartalk.com. So let's get started with today's episode. There are theories out there that many movies, television shows, books, comic books, and even video games have predicted various events that have happened in the future. One of the major events that is believed to have been predicted in a lot of various pop culture media was 9/11. So let's just delve directly into these movies and TV shows. First off, we have the Super Mario Brothers movie from 1993. Now remember that 9/11 happened in 2001. So Super Mario Brothers from 1993 has a scene in it that depicts a woman saying, "Look, it's Koopa's towers," and she points to the Twin Towers, and a plane flies into one of the towers, and they both dissolve, like pixels dissolving. People point that out as predicting 9/11. Another example is an X-Files spin-off TV show called Lone Gunmen, which didn't really make it beyond the pilot. The pilot was aired in March of 2001, 6 months before 9/11 happened. In the pilot, there's a conversation between the characters where they talk about a small faction within the U.S. government who are plotting to stage a domestic terrorist attack in order to obtain military funding. Since the Cold War was over and the arms market was flat, they wanted to get more funding for the military. So they talk about bringing down a 747 full of people in the middle of New York City. In the pilot episode, a plane is actually flying towards the World Trade Center, and they say, hey, it's headed towards the World Trade Center. The crash is averted at the last minute, and the plane flies over top of the Twin Towers. But this episode aired 6 months before 9/11 actually happened. Another example is the Long Kiss Goodnight movie from 1996. There's a scene with Samuel L. Jackson where he and another man discuss the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. and they discuss a plot to get more military government funding by staging an attack on the World Trade Center. And the guy says he has, quote, no idea how to fake killing 4,000 people. And he says they'll have to do it for real and, quote, blame it on the Muslims. Now that example and the example of the lone gunmen come into play because we all know one of the conspiracy theories is that 9/11 was an inside job by our government in order to have a reason to declare war in the Middle East. So naturally, there are people who theorize that movie and the TV show spin-off pilot episode were predicting 9/11. And they probably contributed to the conspiracy theory. Another example is a book from 1983 called Así Sufre Latinoamérica, which translates to This is How Latin America Suffers. The cover of this book depicts a drawing of the Twin Towers, where the towers are breaking and they're on fire, and there are people falling from the building to the ground. The book is about how poorly America treats Latin Americans. The cover art, some people theorize, predicted 9/11. Another example, Cracked Magazine. The cover of July 1975, issue 125 of Cracked Magazine depicts one of the Twin Towers with a plane crashing into it. Another example is a video game called Trade Center Defender Game. It came out in early 2001. In this video game, you shoot planes that are headed towards the Twin Towers in order to try and prevent them from hitting the towers. Now, this game, some sources say that this game was released before 9/11 and some say after. There's not a whole lot of information on the game on the internet, probably because it was pulled down due to the insensitivity of the game. You can find an occasional YouTube video of people playing the game, but there's not a whole lot out there about it. In 1994, Vice magazine did an article about Al-Qaeda, and the artwork for this article depicted Beavis and Butthead dressed in Arabic garb, holding bombs and flying airplanes around the Twin Towers. So some people believe that that was a prediction of 9/11. And yet another example is the Looney Tunes episode called Often an Orphan with Porky Pig and Charlie Dog in August 13th of 1949. In this episode, Porky Pig is trying to get rid of Charlie the dog, trying to send him back to the city, away from the country. And Charlie Dog freaks out about how horrible it is living in the city. And then he yells, "Look, it's the towers, they're falling." And then he collapses to the ground. So again, some people believe that this was yet another prediction of 9/11. But it doesn't stop at books, cartoons, TV shows, or movies. X-Men comic number 189 from January of 1985, there is a scene in the comic book that reads, quote, "The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center lie in ruins. Thousands are dead, many more injured." Some people add that into the column of predicting 9/11. This one is a little bit of a disturbing example. A card game from 1990 called Illuminati New World Order has two cards in it. And this is a card game that's similar to Magic the Gathering, where you play the card and it has a certain action. The two cards that this game contains, one of them depicts the Twin Towers exploding in the center of the buildings, and the other card depicts the Pentagon with an explosion in the Pentagon. So some people believe that these cards, both together being a part of a game called Illuminati New World Order, was a prediction of 9/11. Because again, that's another one of the conspiracy theories. We've got this conspiracy theory that the government is responsible for 9/11, and then you've got the conspiracy theory that the Illuminati and the New World Order is in charge of our government and governments around the world, and that they're responsible for 9/11. So these are all contributing to the theories that they've predicted 9/11 happening in the future. Did these things really predict 9/11, or are they all just pure coincidences? What do you think? But it doesn't really stop there. Those are just the really small examples. Now here's some other little examples that are a little less believable, especially if you just look at them individually. But when you look at a whole bunch of them together, and I'm going to let you know what each of them is here in a second, it'll make sense. You got to kind of wonder. Basically, there are many examples of movies and TV shows depicting the numbers 911 randomly before 911 happened. You'll understand what I mean by this as I go through each example. The first example is Terminator 2 from 1991. On the overpass, when Arnold Schwarzenegger is fleeing the evil Terminator, they go through an underpass, and the top of the underpass says caution 9 foot 11 inches, so it looks like caution 911. In Independence Day from 1996, when Jeff Goldblum is sitting in the plane when they're getting ready to leave after he's warned everybody, and he's got the laptop in his lap with a countdown clock. Well, the countdown clock goes to 9/11. In Godzilla from 1998, there's a scene where a reporter says, quote, "This is the worst act of destruction since the World Trade Center bombing," as the time on the clock on the screen next to the reporter shows 7:17 39 11, which if you look at the last numbers, it's 911 9/11. Then there's another scene where a guy looks at his watch in the same movie, and the small hand is pointed to the 9 and the large hand is pointed to 11. In the movie Trading Places in 1983, there's a scene that shows Eddie Murphy getting out of the car, and then it cuts to a view of the Twin Towers where he's looking up at the Twin Towers, and then it cuts to another scene of a clock on the wall where the hands are pointed to 9 and 11. In Gremlins 2 in 1990, there's a scene with reporters holding a microphone, each of them holding a microphone, and there are 2 microphones next to each other. One of them says 9, the other says 11, and they're next to each other in a way where it reads 9/11. In The Big Lebowski, he writes a check dated September 11. In Enemy of the State in 1998, there's a scene where he says and shows, quote, "Reynolds Thomas Bryan, born 9/11/40. The Patriot movie from 2000 with Mel Gibson, there's a scene where he's weighing a rocking chair, and he says 9 pounds 11 ounces, and then when he sits on it and tries to rock in it, it breaks. In an extremely Goofy movie from 2000, a paper airplane hits Goofy's son right in between his 2 eyes, and when he opens the paper airplane, a note inside says, "Meet us in Music Appreciation aisle 911. But when you take a closer look at the paper, it's folded at the letter N, which makes it look like what some people theorize as the Twin Towers. It's a 1-1 or an LL or 2 lines that would represent either 11 or the Twin Towers. In The Matrix from 1999, Neo's passport's dated September 11th. So are all these just a coincidence? Is there a reason why Hollywood is continuously using the numbers 9/11? Or is it just because 911 is known to be an emergency number and that they use it for that reason? Why is 9/11 or 911 repeatedly used in such subtle ways, and the date September 11, in such subtle ways throughout Hollywood, throughout movies and TV shows? And these are just a small sampling of examples. Is it just a coincidence, or was there some sort of future prediction there? Now, all of these examples I've given you so far are pretty minor, but there's one that's kind of mind-blowing. And you can find the video on YouTube about it. When I post this episode on YouTube, I will try and include the link in the description so that you can watch this video for yourself. This video is about the movie Back to the Future, predicting 9/11. And it was so mind-blowing that it actually made the news, several news sources, because it sounds so ridiculous, but when you really look at it all, I mean, the only words to describe it is mind-blowing. So let's delve into this. How did Back to the Future predict 9/11? Well, here's the theories. In the first movie, In the parking lot, when Marty's meeting Doc Brown, and Doc Brown wants Marty to film the experiment to travel into time for the first time. In the parking lot, there is a sign. It's lit up. It says Twin Pines Mall, and it depicts two pine trees next to each other. And the time on the sign says 1:16, which is 9/11 upside down. And the theory is that the two pines represent the Twin Towers. So they're at the Twin Towers, Twin Pines Mall, where it's 1:16 or upside down 9/11, and there's a surprise terrorist attack from Muslim terrorists when they drive a van in and they kill Doc Brown. Now after this scene, when the scene is portrayed later and Marty runs up, the sign says Lone Pine Mall, and it only shows one pine tree. Now in this scene, before the terrorists come and kill Doc Brown, there's a part where Doc is getting ready to send Einstein off into time. And he sits down next to Einstein, and he's got two stopwatches. And he's showing them to Marty that they both show the same time. And the time that they show is 1:19. And if you read that backwards, it's 9/11. Now there's a smaller plot within the movie Back to the Future that develops, in which Marty is trying to go back in time to warn Doc about the terrorist attack at the Twin Pines. And if you look at it from a symbolic view, Marty's going back in time to warn Doc about the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers at 1:16, read upside down, 9/11. Throughout the entire movie, Marty knows the exact time that the tower will be struck, the clock tower. He knows when the clock tower is going to be struck by lightning. There's even a newspaper clipping in the movie that shows the words "tower struck" about the clock tower. And when the DeLorean goes and travels into the future after the clock tower is struck, it leaves two flaming lines on the road that look like the number 11. Now, if you take each of these incidents out in and of itself, it probably doesn't amount to much. But the theory goes that when you combine all these, it's an obvious attempt to warn everybody about the future event. But it doesn't stop there. That's just in the first Back to the Future. Now there's more in Back to the Future Part 2. In Marty's future house, when Jennifer is sitting on the couch watching the projection screen TV, you see a garden scene with the Twin Pines. They're seen again there on the movie screen. The family all gathers around the movie screen, and then the Twin Pines suddenly morph into the Twin Towers. The Twin Pines actually morph. The screen goes all wonky, like it's getting interference for a second, and they morph into a scene of the Twin Towers. So here, the theory is that they're giving you more clues about the first movie of what the Twin Pines actually mean. But if you look even closer in this scene, you can actually see the Statue of Liberty torch in the living room at the bottom of the screen next to Marty's mom. It is the actual torch flame of the Statue of Liberty. Now also in this scene, Marty's dad is upside down, and this is the only time a character's upside down in any of the movies. So they're all watching this screen. This is when Marty's dad comes in. He's hanging upside down because he had a back injury or something like that. And the theory is that this is to tell you to look at the Twin Towers on the screen from Marty's dad's perspective, to turn it upside down. Well, if you take that scene on the movie screen of the Twin Towers and you flip it upside down, it looks like the towers are falling. If you look at it normal point of view, it looks like there's just some interference where the picture is scrolling, like on an old TV with an antenna, how the picture scrolls over and over when you can't get a signal. Well, if you look at this scene normally, that's what it looks like is happening. But if you flip it upside down and look at it from Marty's dad's point of view, it looks like the Twin Towers are falling. Okay, so moving forward, we're still in Back to the Future Part 2. The date, October 21st, 2015, is the date that Marty travels to both the past and the future. So October 2015, Marty's family is watching the movie screen where the Twin Pines morph into the Twin Towers, which the theory says it's a secret movie because they're watching the screen with the Twin Pines and all of a sudden it morphs to the Twin Towers for a couple seconds and then it's done. So it's being labeled a secret movie by theorists. Robert Zemeckis directed Back to the Future. He also directed a movie called The Walk about the Twin Towers, based on a true story about a man planning to rig a giant wire to the Twin Towers from one tower to the other. Now just keep that in mind. Keep that little note in mind. Robert Zemeckis directed both the Back to the Future movies, and he directed the movie called The Walk about the Twin Towers, where a man's rigging a giant wire across the towers so he can tightrope walk from one tower to the other. Now, the span between 1985 and 2015, those are the years they traveled to the past and the future, is 30 years. Marty writes a letter warning Doc about the terrorist attack and tells him he'll understand the meaning of the warning in 30 years. When Marty writes the warning letter, he slips it into Doc's pocket as Doc is rigging a giant wire to the clock tower. It's theorized that the movie The Walk is the 30-year reveal. When Doc pulls a letter out of his pocket, he asks Marty, "What's the meaning of this?" And Marty says, "Find out in 30 years. So 30 years later, after 1985, in 2015, the movie The Walk, directed by the same director, comes out. In Back to the Future, Part 2, after the tower is struck by lightning, Marty from the future comes running up to Doc, and he is wearing the exact same outfit as Philippe in the movie The Walk. If you look at him side by side, he's got the same colored pants or jeans on, the same color shirt, it's a red shirt, and the same black leather jacket. And they both look similar to each other. So the theory is that the 30-year reveal was the movie The Walk, because you've got the giant wire being rigged up to the tower in both Back to the Future and the movie The Walk. And they're both dressed the same. And they're about the Twin Towers. So it's all supposedly a mild, symbolic, subliminal warning about 9/11. Every time Marty travels in time, he heads towards something related to film. And the theory is that it's a film portal. He's headed towards a movie theater, and just before he hits it, he goes in time. Or he's headed towards a film development depot or a movie screen. And it's theorized that this symbolizes through film, truth will be revealed, telling you that through movies, 9/11 will be revealed. That's what the theory is. So what do you think? Go check out Back to the Future Predicts 9/11 on YouTube, and you'll find the video. If you're listening to this episode on YouTube, or if you want to go check out this episode on YouTube, I'm going to try and include the link in the description so you can watch the video. It's one thing to hear about it, but to actually watch it on the video and see the different parts of the Back to the Future films put together, it's kind of eerie. Is this all coincidence, or is this someone just looking way too much into something? Or was this an actual 9/11 prediction? But Back to the Future doesn't stop there. It supposedly predicts several other things, like the giant flat screen TVs hanging on walls that we have today. When Marty's in the future and he's fired, it's done from a giant flat screen TV on the wall. And it's believed that it also predicts Skype and FaceTime because he's fired through a video chat, which none of that existed in the time that the movies came out. Google smart glasses. In the future, Marty's kids are at the dinner table wearing smart glasses with similar function to Google smart glasses. Drones. When Griff and his gang get arrested, a drone hovers in front of him, snapping pictures for the news. And it looks very similar to drones of today if you were to stick a bunch of news banners on it. Biogas fuel. Doc uses trash in Mr. Fusion to fuel the DeLorean. Some forms of trash, like the banana skin in the movie, can put off gases that can be used as fuel. It's called biogas or biofuel. Europe actually has biofuel cars, And they've even had a biofuel train since 2007, long after these movies came out. The Cubs won the World Series in 2016. Back to the Future portrayed them as winning in 2015. It's a year off, but some still believe that Back to the Future predicted the Cubs win. Fingerprints used in technology. In the Back to the Future movie, it shows fingerprints being used to make payments and open doors, and fingerprints are widely used for things like that today. Our smartphones, our laptops, a number of things. But this all doesn't stop with Back to the Future. The Simpsons are said to have made many future predictions. The Simpsons have been running for over 23 years. Now, you could say that naturally they're going to coincidentally show things on The Simpsons that could come true. But here's some things that kind of makes you wonder. In The Simpsons' September 21st, 1997 episode titled The City of New York versus Homer Simpson, it depicts a magazine cover. Lisa's holding it, and she holds it up to show Bart, and the camera zooms in on the cover. And the cover says, New York, $9. But the $9 is placed right next to the Twin Towers and the background scene of New York. So it looks like it says 9/11 with the Twin Towers. Some people believe that that predicted 9/11. It's believed that The Simpsons and Back to the Future both predicted Trump's presidency. The writers for Back to the Future said that they based Biff Tannen's character in the future completely on Trump. And in the movie, Biff Tannen uses his money to influence political decisions, which is what allows him to essentially run the whole city. In The Simpsons, in 2000, an episode called Bart to the Future, Lisa is president, and she's having a meeting talking about how they've inherited Trump's budget. And then in another episode, where Mr. Burns endorses Mitt Romney during the Mitt Romney and a Barack Obama election, it shows an electoral map when Mr. Burns endorses Mitt Romney, and the map is identical to the Trump electoral win map. But there's some other things that people believe that The Simpsons predicted. The Siegfried and Roy tiger attack was believed to have been depicted in a 1993 episode where the Simpsons go to Las Vegas. And it's a parody of Siegfried and Roy where the tiger mauled them. And that really happened. In 2014, it's said to have predicted the outcome of the FIFA corruption that happened in 2015. And that it predicted that Germany would win the World Cup against Brazil, because that's what actually happened. In 2007, there was an episode that relayed the NSA listening in on the Simpsons conversations. And of course, in 2013 is when Snowden exposed how the NSA listens in on people's conversations. In the episode, this one's really interesting. In the episode Wizards of Evergreen Terrace in 1998, the Higgs boson particle, which is a particle to give other particles mass in quantum physics, it's believed that the Simpsons predicted the Higgs boson particle. Homer, who's supposed to be below average intelligence, writes an equation on a chalkboard for the Higgs boson particle. Scientists discovered the equation in 2012, and they say that the equation that Homer wrote on the chalkboard is nearly the same as the actual mathematic formula that scientists discovered 14 years later. Another prediction that The Simpsons apparently made was the voting machines switching votes. In 2008, there was an episode where Homer tries to vote for Obama, but his vote keeps getting switched to McCain. In 2012, this actually happened. There was a voting machine in Alabama that was found to be switching votes from Obama to Romney, and the machine was removed and replaced. In 1995, there was an episode called Lisa's Wedding, and this one apparently had several predictions in it. In this episode, Lisa sees her future where her fiance uses a smartwatch with voice commands to propose to her, but the smartwatch doesn't work properly. It's said that this episode predicted smartwatches with voice commands. They were created by Apple in 2013. It also shows video calling between Lisa and her mom, similar to FaceTime and Skype. And it also shows an odd-shaped building behind Big Ben clock tower that looks just like the Shard Tower, and it's in the exact same location as the Shard Tower. But construction on the Shard Tower didn't start until 2009, and the building wasn't finished until 2012. And again, this episode was 1995. In a 2001 episode, Papa's Got a Brand New Badge. It shows people gluing cotton balls on ferrets and selling them as toy poodles. Do you remember this news story? In 2013, Huffington Post broke the story about people feeding steroids to ferrets and weasels, fluffing out their fur, and selling them as toy poodles. So it said that they predicted that happening, as ridiculous as it may have sounded. In 1994, in an episode called Deep Space Homer, due to the decline in interest in the space program, NASA decides to let an average Joe go to space as an astronaut. The creators of The Simpsons actually argued greatly over this episode because they felt like it was way too far-fetched for an average person to be invited by a government program to go to space. But in 2013, sure enough, it happened. An average Joe named Oliver Knight beat out 87 applicants to become an astronaut and go to outer space. So when you look at all these things, are they actually predicting the future, or are they influencing the future? Are people seeing these things and saying, hey, let's do this. Let's build this building over by the Big Ben clock tower? Or are they subliminally influenced, where they don't realize that they saw these little subtleties in these movies and TV shows, and then it gets their brain working? Is it a matter of influence, or is it a matter of prediction? Is it a matter of people looking too much into things after the fact? Or is it actually future predictions? It's a pretty interesting thing to look at. And there's many, many other examples out there of movies and TV shows and books and other forms of pop culture and media supposedly predicting things of the future. We just want to ask ourselves, is it predicting or is it influencing, whether subliminally or consciously? What do you think? Check out some of the videos on YouTube. Definitely check out the video about the Back to the Future. I saw that video when I was doing my research for last week's episode about quantum physics. I came across that video with Back to the Future and it blew my mind. I don't know which to believe. It's pretty interesting to think that we could have these subtle future predictions, especially when you mesh that into the whole quantum physics thing. I mean, what if the quantum physics Mandela effect is part of this? What if there are subtle little signs going in there where somebody is time traveling and putting the signs in there? Who knows? It's pretty eerie. It's pretty mind-blowing. It definitely challenges the brain. And I love things that challenge the brain. I feel like any of the theories is possible. The future predictions could be possible. The influence could be possible. The subliminal or subconscious or even conscious impact could be possible. I think they're all definitely interesting. What do you think? Do you think these things predicted the future? Is it pure coincidence? Tell me what you think. Comment on my Podomatic page. Comment on my Facebook page. Let me know if you've had any experiences in these things, or if you have your own theories or own information that I haven't covered. Tell me any new theories you might have. But that wraps up this episode. Be sure to tune in next week where I talk about the simulation theory. Hello, Matrix. Thanks for listening.